My Lords, I rise towards what I would imagine would be the end of a very rich and I think telling debate where we've seen huge expressions of concern about this bill and particularly initial stages of it from all sides of your Lordship's House. And I would very much agree with the Noble Lady Baroness Morris about the difficulty of amending with this bill. I'm working with a number of campaign groups, of parent groups, trying to work out how to deal with the lack of clarity and the incoherence and indeed the contradictoriness of so much of this bill, and it's proving very difficult. And I apologise in advance that normally I try and put down all amendments before the first day of committee, but I haven't managed it this time because there is so much and so much concern out there. I'm going to try not to repeat what's already been said by others, but I do have to begin this whole debate on this bill by reflecting back on my 10-year-old self. And when I was 10 years old, I absolutely was fascinated by and loved lungfish. And they are absolutely amazing, fascinating creatures, and I remain amazed and fascinated by them. But I don't believe that every child in this country should be made to learn about lungfish. And I think this picks up the point made by the Noble Lady Baroness Chapman. Many of us have things we think everybody should know. But the person who should be helping children to discover the things they're interested in, the teacher in the classroom with them, is the person who can best help every child to learn what fascinates them, what interests them, what's going to be of use to them and their community. And the whole direction of particularly Clause 1 here is heading in the opposite direction. Now, I attached my name particularly to Amendment 13 in the names of the Noble Lady Baroness Chapman of Darlington and Baroness Wilcox of Newport as a bit of a sample and a bit of a case study. Now, this is where the Secretary of State is given power to direct the amount of teaching across the school year. And if we think about the very different situations that schools find themselves in now at this moment, but can find themselves in at any time, at the tail end of a hugely destructive, damaging pandemic. And let's think perhaps about a small rural school where pupils have to travel very long distances from a very young age, long travel times, difficult travel. How can it be that a Secretary of State sitting here in Westminster goes, "You have to do this many hours," even when the head and the teachers know that their pupils are exhausted and worn out and struggling, and that there needs to be a balance in people's lives, in balance in the way of teaching? The idea that you can apply one rule to something as simple as the number of hours of teaching in a year. And how do you classify what teaching is? Is a day going out walking through the national park, exploring without any national particular formal curriculum elements, but giving pupils the chance to really experience and be in nature and feel about being in nature? You know, is the Secretary of State going to say, no, that doesn't count in your hours? How can that possibly work? I do want to pick up just one point, and I think it's very interesting. The Noble Lord Knight of Weymouth made a point about Ofsted and suggested that maybe they could just inspect multi-academy trusts under the proposal by the government. Now, the Green Party wants to abolish Ofsted, but actually I think that what the Noble Lord proposed might be a really interesting part-way step along the way, given we know how immensely damaging visits to individual schools Ofsted is. Now, I don't agree with making every school become an academy or making every school become part of a multi-academy trust. But I think that's a really interesting example of the way this whole debate has run, of how this bill is half-baked and not thought through, and there's so many possibilities in so many different ways in which it might develop. And I just want to say one final thing, which is I'm going to, perhaps to the surprise of the House, bring up Brexit. And not because education ever had anything to do with the European Union, but if we go back to the slogan that essentially decided the result of the Brexit referendum, it was "take back control." And I don't think people were really thinking then, or they're thinking now, that the right thing to do is that take back control means the Secretary of State for Education has control at a fine, detailed level of the education of every child in this country.